When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
About the past and about the future.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Draftvice. My name is Walter, and dude, it's been a while. I've been doing a lot of stand-up comedy. If you can tell, I look elderly now. I lost a little bit of weight. Been going to the gym a lot more. What are we talking about today? We're talking about the NFL. We're talking free agency, folks. Because you know what? That's the time of year it is. Super Bowl happened. Chiefs won again, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are. If you're a Niners fan, it was very unfortunate. If you're a Denver Broncos fan, probably you're not happy seeing them continuing to dominate your division, even when their receiving core is made up of a bunch of diddly-do-wrongs. What else can I say, man? That Super Bowl was very boring for first three quarters, got really exciting towards the end. That's about the extent of how I'm going to go into it, because it was a month ago at this point. Y'all probably have your own opinions on it, but let's talk free agency. A lot of sexy stuff going on in free agency, and I think the sexiest thing, the most brilliant thing that's going on right now, Falcons, man. They're making moves. They don't want to be the bottom of the division. They see the NFC is winnable. The Vikings and Kirk Cousins no longer friends, no longer in each other's DMs. Now we got Kirk Cousins signing a multi-year deal, 4-year deal with the effervescent Falcons. But that's not all they did, folks. They also added Darnell Mooney, formerly of the Chicago Bears, a little bit of a speedy guy. If you remember last year, big problem with the Falcons receiving core was not a lot of speed, a lot of cool talent, right? A lot of Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Never got to see Kyle Pitts quite used the way you want him to. They have Bijan, but there was always that missing element, and it was called speed. And apparently they were anemic to it. And now they decided, well, hey, wait a second, we got new head coach. They fire Arthur Smith. They bring in D'Amico Ryans. I think this is going to be an interesting situation for the Falcons, because I don't think this is an upgrade for Kirk as far as locations go. Right, the division is about the same. I don't think the NFC North and the AFC South are that far off. As far as divisions go, I think that the NFC North, you got the Packers, who are competitive, but they no longer have Aaron Rodgers. You got the Detroit Lions, who finally look like they're kind of like a comeuppance team, but, we saw them kind of fold to the 49ers last year in the NFC championship game. I think that was a very good first step for them, though. That happens a lot. Now we got to see if the Detroit Lions could take a step forward and develop their team and try to, make it back to the NFC Championship, where they're going to be, maybe missing a couple of pieces. They did manage to retain their offensive coordinator, but, with the Vikings now moving off of Kirk Cousins, I mean, having Kirk didn't make them get to the playoffs last year. So it is an interesting situation there. Kirk went ahead, tore his Achilles. I think that's a big part of this situation. Maybe they would have been quicker to re-sign him and bring him back if he wasn't coming off an injury. Falcons are taking a risk here, but I think they look at this division as winnable. You look at the Panthers as kind of a little sloppy. I mean, they move off of Frank Reich in less than a year. I'll do an episode talking about all the coaching changes, because I do think that it's kind of a big deal, a lot of the moves that got made as far as coaching hires go. But as far as this move for free agency with the Falcons, moving off of Arthur Smith, was it necessary? I mean, he was 7-9 all 3 years. Never had a quarterback. Now they got a quarterback. Could they have waited to make this move? I don't know, because, there were some things that, were clearly Arthur Smith problems. And some of the questions you have to ask are, hey, was the issues surrounding, say, play calling, keeping Desmond Ridder as your quarterback, not playing Desmond Ridder and getting a good look at him, and instead trying to play Mariota for most of the prior season? Is a lot of that on Arthur Smith? Is that a bit on the front office? How much gets put on each, side's feet? Well, ownership decided it was Arthur Smith that's going to be the one where the heads lay. They kicked him out. They got a new coach. And the Falcons, I think they're going to be running a lot of the same stuff of the Shanahan, play action scheme. They have a lot of good pieces, right? Bijan, Pitts, London. Now they're bringing in Mooney. I think that's a lot of good pieces to bring in. I'm very curious to see what the long-term options are up, what's going to end up happening here. You have a division that, like I said before, the Panthers move off of Frank Reich. They bring in Dave Canales, who is the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers bring in the former Rams offensive coordinator, and then Kentucky OC, and then back to the Rams. Guy who's got some familiarity with Baker Mayfield. And really, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm just going to comment on it because it's really quiet over what they've been doing. Haven't really been doing much in free agency because they, basically their big free agency thing was retaining dudes, right? Keeping Baker, keeping Mike Evans, trading away Carlton Davis, though. Big deal. Went to the Lions. We'll talk more about that later. But this Falcons move makes sense when you look at the rest of that division has a lot of these like mid-tier quarterbacks now, and you basically, I don't know how much you can compete without those mid-tier guys. Falcons defense is very hit or miss. They move on from Okuda. They still have a lot of cool pieces there. We'll see if what they have can turn into a mid to high end unit with the coaching that is coming in. Other than that, though, they're going to be a competitive team. They were a competitive team last year. They do have a good run offensive line. They are going to be losing Hennessy, who who didn't play much last year. Actually, didn't play at all, I don't think. He's going to the Eagles. We'll talk a bit about the Eagles moves. Eagles might be one of my favorite teams again in free agency, just because that's how they handle stuff. In fact, we'll talk about the Eagles next because that's just how fun the Eagles are. But no, again, we're gonna, Kirk Cousins makes them it makes them a playoff level team, right? Now, I said before, it's going to be a downgrade in weapons. I think Addison and Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson. There's a lot of good weapons on that Vikings team. For the injuries that have come out of it, for him not wanting to stay there. Again, he took the money and ran like he's always going to do because that's what these guys are going to. That's what you get paid to. That you get paid to play the game. That's what it is. Generational wealth. I totally understand it. I'm not gonna complain about anybody who makes the decision to go ahead and take the bank where they can, because these teams, they're not loyal to you. Other than the one time with the Giants, the Giants were loyal to Eli for a little bit too long, and then apparently also to Daniel Jones for half a year too long. We'll see where that ends up taking them. Let's talk Eagles, though. Eagles brought in some cool free agents, right? Bryce Huff, defensive end of the Jets, very important pass rusher, rotational guy with the Jets. We'll see what he ends up being for the Eagles. He had a good, he was a good rotational guy, very high, pass rush win rate, all those kind of things. You could listen to anybody on Twitter. They'll, any Jets fans like, oh, I really like him, but he made bank. He made a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Eagles. I think coming in off of that free agency deal, they have Fletcher Cox retiring. They have Jason Kelsey retiring. They are bringing in, Bryce Huff. They're bringing in Matt Hennessy. They have guys already on the roster that are really good. They also bring in Saquon Barkley, which is probably the big name that everybody's going to be talking about right now. Is Saquon Barkley, formerly of the New York Giants. Walter, you know this. And for the folks that don't know, my name is Walter, and welcome on back to Draftvice, streaming on Kick for the first time or second time or third time, however many times I'm going to be streaming on Kick. I'll be back on. I'm going to keep doing this. We're going to make it. After all. So Saquon Barkley, I think that was an interesting move, man. I think there's this, we're starting to get to where the premium running backs, there's a value for paying for them when they hit free agency. I think him and Josh Jacobs were the guys that were worth paying for this year in free agency because they actually can do stuff beyond just being, a regular running back. They both can catch balls out of the backfield. I think, Saquon still has that home run hitter ability to him, and Josh Jacobs can make, yards where there's no yards. And both of those things are very important. And I think when you look at the contracts that are coming out, I mean, now you're paying Saquon Barkley the equivalent of like $13 million a year, $26 million fully guaranteed. That's 2 years of his income. That's not a lot in this day and age of the NFL. You got to think about it. Think how much money is going to be circulating through these contracts. Mike Evans just signed for an over $20 million a year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's making he's gonna probably make more than what Saquon's gonna make over the next 2 years for sure. And if that's the case, and well over like double, and like to some degree, like it's very like it makes a lot of sense to give Mike Evans a lot of money, because of what he's been in the NFL. They don't make a lot of wide receivers quite like him. He had a career year. He was dominant. I think Baker Mayfield, part of the reason why his contract looked very reasonable at basically 3 years, $100 million, but really breaks down to, if they want to get out of it, 2 years, $50 million, or 1 year and $40 million. It ends up breaking down to a very, very reasonable deal. So if they want to move off of Baker Mayfield, they can. And I think part of him coming back in a reasonable deal was getting the guy who helped make this year his best year in the NFL, Mike Evans, back in the building. I think there was a lot of haircuts being made, and I think it's reasonable. I think that team is going to be an intriguing team to look at going forward. Why do I bring those deals up? When you look at Saquon Barkley's deal, and you're talking about $12.5, $13 million a year, give or take. Yeah, it can get up to $15 million in incentives, but we won't know more about those incentives until we get to, the real breakdowns of the contract. Still, I mean, you're paying him like a slot receiver, and he's doing a lot more. Which I think if you take a premium running back salary, and you give that to the wide receiver at that salary, I would probably, at this stage where they're at right now with these premium running back salaries, take the premium running back. I think I would. Not because I think that they're exponentially a lot better, but because especially a guy like Saquon, who, you take the home run hitter running back mentality. Guys like Nick Chubb and Saquon and Josh Jacobs, who can really grind out and win some rounds. I'm not going to spend that much on a guy like Najee Harris. No. But this is why it's not a zero-sum game. It's not that this is always a dumb move. I do think that Hennessy was a good signing as well. Hennessy played really well while he was with the Falcons as their center the year prior, before he got injured. He got injured, I think, right before the season. Falcons are just very good at churning the butter on that offensive line, constantly drafting dudes. Former third-round pick, Matt Hennessy. So I like what the Eagles have done so far. There's going to be more names out there that they pick up and bring in. Let's talk a little bit about the Titans, because I think the Titans, they were one of the quickest ones to pull the trigger on a lot of names early on. Lloyd Cushenberry, former center of the Broncos, they've agreed to terms with. They're possibly going to be signing Tony Pollard. They've agreed to terms with him. Chidobe Awuzie, who was the corner for the Bengals. You're hearing some names here that have some familiarity with the head coach, Brian Callahan, who's bringing in his dad. Bill Callahan, former offensive line coach of the Browns. Prior to that, the Commanders. He's been a head coach around the league, and now he's coaching for his son. Very unique situation there. I think that's going to be an interesting team. I'm very curious to see how much Callahan brings in. I know Callahan was a favorite last year with the Cardinals, for him to go there and be the head coach. And I think he's gonna, I think there's some chances here that he might be we're seeing a little bit of a brain drain throughout the NFL. A lot of, again, people are pulling from these offensive coaches, and as they leave these teams, we're seeing maybe we'll see some decline from the Bengals of not having Callahan there. Maybe we'll see some decline from, a few other teams. But I actually do think that, looking at it, I like what they've done so far with Lloyd Cushenberry adding to the center room. They're bringing in Kenneth Murray to be a linebacker on a 2-year deal worth $15 million with a max value of $18, which is a pretty solid deal. Like I said, Chidobe Awuzie was a very solid corner for the Bengals. Now he's going to be with the Titans. And Tony Pollard, I think it's going to be an interesting, they don't have a big back in that room. So I'm curious what their plan's going to be as they continue to try to, they're going to be replacing Derrick Henry, who just signed with, or who's agreed to terms with the Baltimore Ravens. So we'll see where that goes. We also have some stuff going on with the Raiders. Raiders are agreeing to terms with Christian Wilkins, formerly of the Miami Dolphins. Big loss there for the Dolphins, but this deal is expensive. $110 million 4-year deal. I mean, again, probably going to be really a 1.5 to 2 year deal that they can get out from. But, I think it might be value-wise, they needed to bring guys in. I think they wanted to get Crosby, a guy on that D line to help him, be able to penetrate and, kind of call some stuff up the middle. And Wilkins is good. I think he's a solid, above average player at D tackle. I was a little shocked that the Miami Dolphins did not find a way to retain him, but as the time kept on going on that clock, it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. The Raiders are also bringing in Gardner Minshew on a 2-year deal. $25 million deal that includes $15 million guaranteed. So low end starter money, high end backup money. We'll see what ends up happening as far as, do they try to trade up and draft somebody? Is it going to be a QB battle this year? Are they going to bring somebody else in? Maybe trade for Justin Fields and see what they can get out of like a mishmash of quarterbacks. But as of right now, that's kind of an interesting situation to kind of keep our eyes on, as what's going to happen with Devontae Adams? Are they going to try to like churn out that roster a little bit more? They did, they announced they're going to cut Jimmy Garoppolo the first day of free agency. They're not going to designate it a June 1st cut, which makes sense. They are going to get $11 million in cap space for this year. And any contracts you're going to be signing outside of the rookie wage scale, you're going to be able to structure those contracts around that $11 million that you're, around what you already have. So the reason why you're not cutting Jimmy Garoppolo or designating him a post-June 1st cut is that it splits the dead cap across the 2 years. But if you're if you're getting any kind of relief, you're getting solid relief, it doesn't really make sense to go ahead and cut. They're cutting Jimmy Garoppolo for sure, but it doesn't make sense to go ahead and go ahead and make him a June 1st designated cut. We'll see what ends up happening with Hunter Renfrow, a very solid wide receiver earlier in his career, but really the last 2 years hadn't done much. Started to see a little bit of light towards the end of last year, but for 2 years, basically, he's been kind of MIA. We'll see if maybe he joins Derek Carr with the Raiders as a trade or a cut candidate. We also got the Jags, who did so many kind of cool things. They traded for Mac Jones. I don't know if I agree with everything they did, but like trading for Mac Jones, I saw a lot of people kind of curious about that maneuver. But for his price as a backup quarterback, you look at where some of these backup quarterback contracts are going right now. He's not a bad choice to go ahead and just trade. They're trading a 6th round pick to get him. It was very minute cost, and for the minuscule amount that he's going to be making on his salary for the rest of that deal from the Patriots, I think it's not a big deal. They also, Jacksonville went ahead and signed Darnell Savage for a 3-year, $21 million deal. So, $7 million APY. This is something I actually had to talk with people about, because it does seem like a lot of these safety contracts keep on getting reduced and reduced. And again, a lot of it's because they're playing too high and they don't have to have a single high free safety. But some of these guys, like Darnell Savage, was good. I was a big Darnell Savage fan. But again, it's going to be the question of what's the impact of some of these guys and what they're doing. And again, a lot of the times it's role. It's what you do in that defense. And not every safety matches every defense. You saw it with Xavier McKinney going to the Packers. He's getting a deal that's $17 million a year going to the Packers. He's replacing Darnell Savage, who is going to be making almost half or more than half of that, almost a third of that, give or take. So Jags also brought in Gabe Davis, supposedly on a 3-year, $13 million deal. Again, this is kind of a noted thing of, these are all agreed to terms. We're, technically not at the start of free agency, but they've agreed to terms on a 3-year, $39 million deal. I'm not a huge Gabe Davis fan. They might be losing Calvin Ridley. They might not. Now there's a lot of debate because I think Calvin Ridley's market's basically the Patriots and the Jaguars, it's sounding like, until we get full-on confirmation as to what ends up being the case with that. I think that him going to the Jags might be a better move. I think you've already built up some chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. If the Jags can find a way to get him back in that building, I think would be a very smart idea. They have Christian Kirk. Now they're bringing in Gabe Davis. Jerry Jeudy was just traded. He had a $13 million 1-year deal left, and he was traded to the Browns for, peanuts from the Broncos. Maybe they could have done a deal like that. But I think, what Calvin Ridley is a very good route runner. He's still able to do that element of it, but he did disappear a lot last year in games, and it was kind of like you always had a question: was this the game plan? Was it scheme? He had some, but sometimes it was also they were just defenses were planning around him at certain points too. I'd be very intrigued. I kind of hope to see Ridley back with the Jags. I think that would be the best football scenario for both the team, the player. I don't get me wrong. I want the Patriots to kind of be able to like. I'm always kind of like I'm always intrigued by fun things going on. So I would be intrigued to see if the Patriots managed to get him in the room because their receiving core is nothing. I mean, they just went ahead and kicked Devonta Parker to the curb as well. Devin Duvernay's agreed to terms with the Jags as well. They're also bringing in Ronald Darby. So, like, the Jags have a lot of cool things going on there. Not a lot of stuff going on with the Broncos. I felt like the Broncos last year were a big team with a lot of free agency. The big thing that happened with the Broncos is they moved on from Russell Wilson. They'll be paying him a lot of money from cutting him, but he's going to go play with the Steelers instead. Broncos are bringing in Brandon Jones on a 3-year contract. It sounds like they've agreed to terms as well as Malcolm Roach, D-tackle from the Saints. Once again, another Saints guy that our buddy Sean Payton be bringing in, and there's no knock on it. I think I totally understand doing it. I think the next thing I want to talk about, because I talk a bit about the Giants here or there. I have a little bit more familiarity with the Giants' situation. But, they went ahead. They signed Packers guard John Runyon. 3-year deal, $30 million. I think this is a fine contract. I don't know if I really had him as a top-end guard. They moved on from Glowinski as a cut. They brought in Devin Singletary. I'm not a big fan of that at all. I get it. Like, you need some, veteran presence in the room as you move on from Saquon. But just bring back Matt Breida. Sign, draft a guy, take some shots on some restricted free agents. I don't know. I don't know if I would be allocating any kind of real expense on Devin Singletary. Not that I think he's a bad dude or a bad player. I think he's a solid player, but I would have rather at that point spend $2 million more a year and get DeAndre Swift, who went to the Bears. Like at that point, it felt very mixed. I'm not quite. This is the problem with the Giants. I'm not quite sure what their plan is here. They're moving on from a lot of coaches. They're bringing in new guys. No more Wink Martindale. But I do like what they did with the trade. They acquired Brian Burns from the Panthers for a 2nd and a 5th round pick, which was the same price they paid or what they got paid for. Going ahead and trading away Leonard Williams to the Seahawks last year. So I like Brian Burns. I think he's a really good edge rusher. I think when you combine him, Dexter Lawrence, and then maybe you see again a little bit more progression from Kayvon Thibodeau, that D-line could be kind of intriguing to create a lot of mismatches along the line of scrimmage. Get some penetration, go ahead and get upfield. I think there's a lot there. I think that's maybe my favorite move of this cycle with the Giants. Just because I think that there's a lot of value to be had out of Brian Burns that really hasn't been had yet, hasn't had an interior penetrator quite like Dexter Lawrence. And they seem to be able to, we'll see what ends up happening with that defense with a new D coordinator. Let's talk a little bit about the Packers because they go ahead. They're agreeing to terms with Josh Jacobs on a 4-year, $48 million deal. So, again, another $12 million APY deal. We'll get more details on that as some more stuff kind of comes out. They also released 2 big stars of the past, Aaron Jones and David Bakhtiari. Apparently, Aaron Jones has already found a home. Aaron Jones finding a home, and probably because his agent was probably keeping his ear to the ground on finding possible, kind of some possible options for some. Hang on one sec, just sharing this on the Twitterverse, see if anybody actually will join on with that. But, Aaron Jones, there was some speculation maybe he would join Aaron Rodgers in New York. That didn't last much longer. And then Xavier McKinney, man, I mentioned it before with the safety deal. 4 years, $68 million a year, $68 million deal, $17 million a year. A lot of money now for that, safety linebacker hybrid kind of dude that Xavier McKinney is. I like Xavier McKinney a lot. I was shocked the Giants didn't find a way to retain him, but with this kind of money, it depends on what your system is, what you're looking to do. I think it that might not have been my favorite maneuver as far as as far as things that I would probably spend my resources on as I continue to try to share this on the Twitter spheres. Let's go see what else we got here. I got the Commanders. Commanders are doing some stuff with Dan Quinn, bringing in some old friends like a Mr. Tyler Biadasz of center of the Dallas Cowboys. Austin Eckler is coming in on a 2-year deal. Dorrance Armstrong, also a Cowboy. Dante Fowler, also a former Cowboy. I think we're kind of getting a thing here. A lot of dudes who know Dan Quinn want to come hang out with Dan Quinn and play with him. They're also bringing in former Chiefs guard Nick Algieri. Algieri. Is Nicholas Algieri. All right, now we're just making Italian accents and stuff. They are also bringing in Cleveland Farrell. Again, I think they're trying to and Frankie Louvu. I think the plan here is to keep on throwing stuff at this defense to kind of because they lost a lot of pieces. They traded away Chase Young. They traded away Montez Sweat. They still have Allen and Payne, and I think those guys are going to create great interior pressure. But they don't really have a lot of guys for the edge. And since they're spending probably their pick this year on a quarterback, elite edge presence probably won't be found in the draft where they are drafting, at least where they are currently. That doesn't mean that it's impossible, but I think that we will see what ends up happening as far as other ways they try to manufacture some of that defense. Again, Quinn went to the Dallas Cowboys, made their defense exponentially better. We'll see who else they manage to scrape in, but it seems like they're finding these kind of bargain basement defensive players to kind of bring in and be able to scrape up some ability to go ahead and compete in the NFC East, which is a very competitive division. Dallas hasn't really done anything so far. Ravens, like I mentioned before, signed Derrick Henry, formerly of the Titans. Seahawks extend Leonard Williams on a 3-year contract worth $21 million a year. That's all I really know. I know they did announce part of that contract on their page, so we'll see what ends up happening. Beyond that, what else do we got here? We got the Browns doing a whole bunch of stuff that maybe nobody's paying attention to. They bring in Jameis Winston, so now they'll have the only 2 quarterbacks ever to be accused of SA in their quarterback room. That's kind of neat, right? Let's alienate all the women fans for our team, folks. One guy who likes massages, one guy who likes groping Uber drivers. I mean, listen, I can't defend what that team does. I can't. It's actually kind of a little offensive in my mind what they continue to be okay with. It's one thing to have 1, but 2, really? You had to go for all 2 of them. Fine. They are re-signing Michael Dunn. I mentioned before, Brian Callahan becoming the head coach of the Titans. Well, this is leading to the eventual, I think, major issue with the Browns going into this offseason is offensive line. They are retaining Michael Dunn, guard. I'm very curious. Again, they're going from having maybe one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL to, not a known commodity. And there's a lot of stuff on that offensive staff where there is a lot of change up, where, they lose Alex Van Pelt, who is a very big, voice in that locker room and in that coaching staff, and he's going on to be the Patriots offensive coordinator. They lose Callahan. They lose a lot of pieces that I think were very important there. Browns also agreed to terms with Jordan Hicks, linebacker, formerly of the Vikings. Now, we saw this defense play well this year, right? A lot of rumors they're going after DJ Reader. Haven't seen anything official on that yet. They did bring back Maurice Hurst on a 1-year, $3.2 million contract. They've also agreed to a $23 million contract, 2-year contract with Zadarius Smith, bringing back 2 guys who panned out on these last-minute quick deals that they did last year. I think that's a good move. They are losing Anthony Walker to the Dolphins. We can talk about the Dolphins for a second, because really the Dolphins are losing a lot of players, folks. They are bringing in Shaq Barrett, Jordan Brooks, Anthony Walker. I'm curious to see what their new look defense is going to be. But yeah, I think that's about the extent of it. I think their defense is, now they're moving to, Vic Fangio's now going to the Eagles. There's kind of a reset kind of going on. Again, they lost a lot of people. They lost Robert Hunt. They lost They lost. Who else did they lose? They lost somebody else. We'll touch on that in a little bit because I'm sure we'll go through more of these names that keep coming down the pike. Let's talk Lions because, like I said before, made it to the NFC Championship game this year, and then kind of fell apart towards the end. They have agreed to terms with Marcus Davenport on a 1-year deal. It seems to be that this is kind of becoming his thing of going to place, being a 1-year, kind of like becoming Jadeveon Clowney to some degree. And I do think that makes a lot of sense. Clowney had a kind of a similar situation where he was very. I mean, Clowney was a different level pick. Marcus Davenport, although a lot of investment in both those guys because Davenport, there was a first round pick trade to get Davenport for the Saints. Then he goes on to be on the the Vikings, and and now he's on the Lions. I mentioned before, Lions also traded for Carlton Davis, a guy who's been a very good man corner. This, like I said before, that frees up money for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lions, who had a very good cash and cap situation, we're looking to bring in some very key components to, maybe boost their defense a little bit more. I think this is the perfect situation for that. So good on them. The Jets have been kind of quiet for the most part. They are bringing in Javon Kinlaw, formerly of the 49ers. Also, John Simpson, guard, formerly of the Rams. I think Ravens. I think that's kind of an interesting maneuver. It makes me wonder what's going to happen. I know he was a left guard. See what ends up happening. I know Tomlinson, there's been a lot of talk he's going to be off that roster. They already have Elijah Vera Tucker. They've got Tippmann. So, and there's been a lot of talk of maybe they'll move AVT to right tackle, and get him consistently playing at right tackle so that way he doesn't keep getting injured. So he's used to playing one singular position. We also have the Jets agreeing to terms with Tyrod Taylor and Lucky Fotu, D tackle, formerly of the Cardinals. Tyrod's a good pickup for that because, you're hoping that, Rodgers doesn't get injured 2 years in a row, but at least Tyrod kind of keeps you in the fight a little bit more, especially if you have maybe some lingering injury issues. We saw the Giants play better when they had Tyrod in the field than when they had Daniel Jones on the field. And that was not like a one-off thing. Like, he was doing it consistently better than what Daniel Jones was doing up until that point. And yeah, you can make some raise some issues as far as like some guys, being injured, some guys not being able to, some guys just not playing. So I get it. I really do. But overall, I think I kind of want to lean on the, I think it was a good move for somebody to pick him up. And again, the Jets had a way, they're moving off of Zach Wilson 100%, it sounds like. So big deal that they go ahead and get a guy like Tyrod in the building. Niners, they're probably going to be releasing Eric Armstead. In the meantime, they are agreeing to terms with Leonard Floyd, big time edge help. Yiddish Matos, like I think they're trying to find piecemeal help because they're going to be losing Chase Young. They're going to be losing Randy Gregory. They're losing pieces to this defense that they did allocate some assets to. Chargers are signing Gus Edwards to a 2-year deal after losing Austin Eckler. Again, a little bit more of a ground and pound kind of guy. Grinder. Not a bad move. Will Dissly, formerly of the Seahawks, he's planning to sign a deal with the Chargers as well. Panthers, they're spending, man. They're spending, getting some guards. Robert Hunt, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, they spent big on him. 5-year, $100 million deal. He's a little versatile, very good pass protector. I think that's kind of the idea. They also got in Damian Lewis, formerly of the Seahawks. I think that this is going to be one of those things where they're trying to. Well, Damian Lewis has some familiarity with Dave Canales and the system that he's going to be running in there and what they're going to plan on doing. So I think that that's a smart move in and of its own self. You want to be able to, have guys who know your system coming in, and I think bringing in Damian Lewis was a smart move on their end. I think that those two guys can help bolster an offensive line that already has some good pieces, but the interior was having some issues. They moved off of Bozeman as well, the center, it sounds like. That's going to be a big deal. Let's talk Bengals, because Bengals, I think, again, we're talking a team that, another cat team, Another team's going to be in it to win it this year, I think. They got T. Higgins on the franchise tag, big deal. I think he wants an extension. Part of what I think is going to go into this, though, is they just extended Drew Sample. I don't think that's going into it. I think it's really come down to what kind of cash you want to expend to keep two wide receivers there that are really good. One that's exponentially better, better than most of the rest, and one that's really good. Maybe it's just going to be we want him for one more year, and they'll do the same thing they did with Bates when they had him and they kept on tagging him. Geno Stone from the Ravens got signed on a 2-year, $15 million deal. Zach Moss was signed, and part of the reason, they're agreeing to terms with Zach Moss, and part of the reason why they're doing that is because they are trading Joe Mixon to the Houston Texans. And I think that's a good move for both teams, frees up some money, frees up some commitment, and then also, Mixon's getting older. I think it's interesting that they're going to, a lot of that money that they're going to be skipping out on from paying Joe Mixon, his bonus and all that stuff. I think it was going to be, I think it's maybe $3 or $4 million difference. It's not a lot different. But I think it was time. Moss played pretty well last year. I don't think Mixon was as bad as people make it sound. I kind of did feel like he was on a decline. I don't know if he's worse than Zach Moss. I guess the question is he $3 million better than Zach Moss? And I'm not sure the answer to that. They're also bringing in Mike Gesicki on a 1-year contract that's worth up to $3.25 million. So there's that. What else we got going on here? Steelers. They're bringing in Patrick Queen. We've already talked about them signing Russell Wilson. I don't know, man. I don't know what the Steelers' plan is, to be honest. I don't have answers. They, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, that whole menage nothing over there didn't really work out. Now they're going to go ahead and try to rely on a cheap Russell Wilson contract and and see, maybe Kenny Pickett, beats him out. If that's the case, lights out for Russell as far as his career. Pittsburgh's been constantly trying to figure out their linebacker problems for a while now. So I don't know what the whole deal is going to be as far as, Patrick Queen never really ended up being the true. He ended up getting a lot better towards the end by having Roquan Smith next to him, I think. I think the value of having both those linebackers for the Ravens was really good. Now, can he be something that he never was in Pittsburgh? Can he be something he never was in Baltimore for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Cardinals have some moves, I guess. That, again, it feels like a year where they're doing stuff, but nothing that I can really put my finger on. They signed Sean Murphy-Bunting, former second-round pick of the Bucs, a year with the Titans. D-tackle Justin Jones got signed. Mac Wilson got signed. Again, nothing big there. Not a lot of big names. Patriots doing some stuffs. Extend Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver. They're also signing Antonio Gibson. I think this is actually a very intriguing budget maneuver to kind of bring in a guy that you're like, ooh, okay, this could be interesting. This could work. This could be a value pickup as a 3-year, $11 million contract, $5.3 million fully guaranteed. So not a lot of money dedicated to him. If they use him just as a receiver, I think it could be something kind of interesting as like a pass-catching back, but also he's not a bad runner. His problem was fumbling. His problem was putting the ball on the ground. You got to stop doing that, Antonio Gibson. But if he ever figures it out, if they figure out what they're doing, I know they also signed Jacoby Brissett. I think that's going to be an interesting one because I can't fathom that that's where they're stopping here, right? Maybe they're the team. We're going to talk a little bit at the end of this about Justin Fields. And what's left as far as his options go. But, they're agreeing to terms with Jacoby Brissett. They're bringing in Chukwuma Okafor from the Steelers. So, again, tackle, linebacker Seon Takitaki from formerly of the Browns. They're bringing him in. He's got his roles in different defenses before for the Browns. Good as a run stuffer and kind of, and they've had different moments where he's been versatile. So I'm curious to see what Gerard Mayo wants to do with him. They've already released Devontae Parker. He's going to join up with, I think, the Eagles is what the rumor was at this point. Colts have just been extending a lot of their own, whether it's Pittman, Tyquan Lewis, Pittman, who they already franchise tagged, but now they got an official extension. Grover Stewart, they extended on a 3-year deal. They just keep on extending dudes. Bills, again, another team that's kind of mostly just extending their own, whether it's A.J. Epinesa, Deion Dawkins, who trolled everybody with a tweet saying that he got cut and then got a 3-year extension. Very important piece of that Bills offensive line, Deion Dawkins. So, again, not a lot of things going on for the Bills Mafia. Losing some pieces here or there, but not enough where I feel like it's going to be. I think the thing is that if you're not doing anything, then if you're not advancing, then you're staying stagnant. I'm not excited about what you're doing, right? So maybe we'll see more stuff as, the free agency goes on. We probably will from all these teams, the ones that haven't made a huge noise yet. Let's talk Vikings. Already talked about how they lost Kirk Cousins. They also have brought in Aaron Jones on a contract. Kind of be their replacement to Alexander Mattison, who they cut earlier this offseason. They're also bringing in Jonathan Grenard, formerly of the Texans, on a 4-year deal, $76 million contract. They're bringing in, allegedly, Andrew Van Ginkel, linebacker of the Dolphins, 2-year, $20 million, $14 million guaranteed. I'm curious to see what their plan is, because it's like bringing in a lot of defensive talent. A lot of guys familiar, obviously, with Brian Flores, some of them. A lot of linebacking talent, and it seems like they're trying to, formulate their defense in the meantime as they try to figure out what's going to be the next step on offense. They've agreed to terms with Sam Darnold, 1-year, $10 million deal. So I can't imagine that's where they're stopped. There's a lot of talk that they're going to be a trade-up candidate for the NFL draft. I mentioned it before, Kirk Cousins. Is Atlanta really in a better spot than, say, pick your team, but my team would probably then say the Vikings, because the Vikings have Addison and and Justin Jefferson, and I think that's a huge thing to have as far as those guys go. I think Darnold could keep them kind of functional, but I don't know. I'm hoping they have a plan. Either they trade up, which I think is probably the what they're going to end up doing at the end of this, is trading up, getting like getting one of those guys that's sitting up there at the top of the draft, whether it's Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, somebody to get in that building beyond just Sam Darnold. But yeah, not a lot really too exciting for the Vikings. If anything, if I'm a Vikings fan, I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be kind of like a stagnant year. We talked about the Broncos, the Raiders, the Commanders, Falcons, Eagles, Texans. Texans brought in Lonnie Johnson, formerly of the Saints. Also, I think he started his career with the Texans, technically. 1 year, $2.5 million deal. They're bringing in Danico Autry. That guy seems to be traveling around quite a bit. Was on the Titans. 2-year, $10 million deal. They're signing Jeff Okudah to a 1-year deal worth up to $6 million. And they traded for Joe Mixon, which I think might be the brilliant thing that they did. That's an interesting thing, though, because they seem to be in on the elite running back market. A lot of rumors that they were trying to go get Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. Clearly, they're not huge fans of what they had last year with Singletary and Dameon Pierce. And they feel like they can get more out of a Joe Mixon running back-led backfield. I don't think it's a bad maneuver. I think that I'm very curious by what the strategy is here. They're also signing Azeez Al-Shakir from the Titans. I look at the general case. A lot of these are, cheaper defensive, like bulk up deals, see what some of these guys can do. The Mixon trade, I think, is the biggest trade, because I'm curious what happens with Dameon Pierce if he ends up being the backup there, or does he get traded to some other team that's like, hey, I kind of like what he was able to do. We'll see. I'm not this is where I go, it's kind of interesting, because I didn't think the drop, I didn't think I would have made the trade to go from Zach Moss to Joe Mixon. I also don't know if I would have really made an effort to go from Dameon Pierce to Joe Mixon at this stage, because Joe Mixon's getting older. He's played a lot of snaps. He's also had some injury issues over the years. So it is a little worrisome. Bears, the only thing I've seen so far from the Bears is them signing DeAndre Swift, 3-year, $24.5 million contract. So listen, I'm not knocking that maneuver. I actually like Swift a lot, but they're also moving off of. I think that it's kind of like getting a discount on Saquon Barkley. Like, he's not Saquon, but he can do a lot of things Saquon does. I think there's some value there. I think that might be the one maneuver I went, all right, like, I kind of like that the Bears did that, especially if you're taking Caleb Williams. If you find a way to get another receiver for that receiving core, whether you draft a guy this year, which I think will definitely be the case, you know, depending on what wide receiver they end up getting, I think that can become a very nice, situation for a first-year quarterback. Then usually the number one overall pick gets to be. And it sounds like it's going to be Caleb Williams, and I think that could end up being a very good situation for Caleb Williams in the end. Again, an offensive line that's gotten better. We'll see what they end up getting for Justin Fields as the deck chairs and the Titanic keep on going around and around. Because we talked, there's a lot of quarterbacks that are coming up that are available and or have already signed, or we're losing places to send Justin Fields to. I think as of right now, maybe he could still get traded to the Raiders. I think he doesn't get traded till draft night, and that's just my opinion, because I do think that that's kind of the case. I think that that he's going to go ahead and get traded to the Raiders or to the Patriots on draft night when somebody misses out on somebody, and it's like, hey, here's the value that we're going to trade him at. Maybe it's a second-round pick. It's going to be a Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold. But I honestly think that he's not going to get in as much as Sam Darnold. I think it's going to be probably closer to like the end of the second round or a third-round pick. And you really have to be a team that's like, maybe in a surplus of assets to do it. And I think the team that might, by that point in time, have a surplus of assets would be the New England Patriots, kind of like in this Miami Dolphins-style rebuild, if they go that route, because there's a lot of talk that they're the team that's going to trade down from number 3 if the right quarterback isn't there. So if that's the case, I think that there's a lot of potential there. Rams have made some moves. It feels like it's been a while since they've made moves on like some mid-tier guys. Here they go ahead and sign Jonah Jackson of the Detroit Lions. That's going to be a piece of that offensive line. That's MIA for the Detroit Lions going to the Rams. I don't know if he was really the best piece of that offensive line. I really don't think he was, but he was a very good piece. And again, I think that adding him to their offensive line, they were already a really good offensive line room, but hey, man, I'm not going to go ahead and dispute what McVay does, right? They also brought in Colby Parkinson from the Seahawks. Also, the Seahawks signed an extension for Noah Fant. I know I'd mentioned our friend on the Leonard Williams earlier. I forgot to mention Noah Fant as far as that scenario goes. So overall, not a lot going on there. Talked about the Colts, Patriots. I talked a bit about Cardinals, Steelers, Panthers, Chargers, Niners. Talked about them. Lions, Jets. Talked about them. The only thing I've seen about the Chiefs is that they've agreed to a deal with Irv Smith. Dolphins. I think that's it. I think I've run through most of the stuff that really piqued my interest. I probably did miss some stuff, which means I came down to the right exact time to talk about the deck chairs and the Titanic with Justin Fields. Like I said, Tampa Bay didn't really bring in anybody new. There's been a lot of re-signings, like Chase Edmonds came back. Broncos, Russell Wilson. Yeah, I guess I really did burn through a lot of this stuff. That's good. See if anything new happened before I jump off. I'll go to Roto World, even though it's not actually called Roto World anymore. Let's see. Go to that, and then Jeremy Chin. Commanders agreed to terms with Jeremy Chin. Oh, wow, another kind of unique player, puzzle piece kind of dude. Jeremy Chin, 1 year, $5.1 million contract with the Commanders. These Commanders, they're making a lot of these kind of smart, cheap deals. I kind of like that. Bills and linebacker Nicholas Morrow agreed to a 1-year term. That's a linebacker from the Eagles. Not really, we'll see. I think the thing with the Bills is that they're kind of in this process where they are trying to replace guys. Milano's coming off an injury. They released a lot of dudes right before the start of it with Poyer and Trey White, and again, they're gonna have to kind of rework that defense. I'll say this: McDermott did coach up that defense after losing a lot of pieces, so it wasn't like they were totally out of it. Jordan Elliott, former D tackle of the Cleveland Browns, has agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal with the 49ers. They're going to be replacing Eric Armstead, so I think that's going to be a smart and useful maneuver. He's a guy who was a third-round pick who had a lot of hype around him. He was a PFF favorite back in that draft and just didn't really turn into anything that I think what people might have been expecting. But I think it ended up being an okay situation for him. Let's see what else we got here. Got Commanders. Let's see. Panthers have agreed to terms with D tackle Sean Robinson, formerly of the Giants, on a 3-year deal. So yeah, Sean Robinson was another piece that was added to that Giants room last year, D tackle room that was already kind of very deep as it was. Good D tackle. I actually thought that was a weird thing that he signed with the Giants last year, but I think everybody wants to sign with the Giants and stand next to Dexter Lawrence, who is literally humongous. I think it's a smart move by the Panthers as they continue to try to, add players, add talent. Even though they just moved on from one of their best talents in Brian Burns. Devontae Parker agrees to a 1-year deal with the Eagles. I mentioned that before. Josh Uche's back with the Patriots. They also got Uwenyu back, the Patriots. Oh, maybe I didn't talk about the Patriots because I don't think I talked about Uwenyu. And I thought that was a big deal that they got him back. I think I skipped that. So I thought that was actually the biggest deal of all the Patriots signings. Was the Uwenyu signing and the Jacoby Brissett signing. Good thing with Jacoby is he's familiar with Alex Van Pelt from his time in Cleveland last year. I'm a big fan of AVP. I kind of want to see him succeed. Seems like a nice dude. Seems to have very good relationships with a lot of the players he's with. I think that's why you heard a lot of stuff about maybe Baker Mayfield going to the New England Patriots. That was one of the people who actually still was a Baker fan after Baker left, along with a lot of the people in that building. And I kind of like Baker. I think he's kind of fun. Got the moxie thing going for him. I don't know if that injury to his shoulder weakened his arm, though. There were some times last year in that Tampa Bay offense where I just went, oh, you used to be able to hit that. And I don't know if that shoulder rehab, all the stuff that was going on, when he injured himself in Cleveland, then trying to change up his throwing, a bit, like, because he did. He said he changed up his throwing form. I'm not sure if that did only good things for him, or it might have, there might have been a step back on some things as well, especially the power that he throws with. And again, he's still got a very strong arm, but you'll see sometimes every once in a while it's not where it needs to be. Colts agreed to a contract with Kenny Moore for 3 years, $30 million. Again, they keep on re-signing their dudes. I mentioned it before that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be cut tomorrow. Dante Fowler signs with the Commanders. That was already discussed. Chase Young is expected to visit the Panthers and the Saints. That's going to be an interesting one because he's never, outside of his rookie season, he never really kind of played to his pedigree. And he was a guy who should have been probably really good. A lot of the injury stuff kind of took a bit out of him. You could also maybe blame the coaching staff that was in Washington because, again, I'm not entirely sure they were, freeing guys up. Again, Montez Sweat developed really well over there, so I guess I can't really knock him entirely. The Bears agreed to terms with Gerald Everett, formerly of the Chargers, on a 2-year, $12 million deal. That's an interesting one. They keep on adding tight ends to that room. They got Cole Kmet. Gerald Everett's more of a move tight end. But, I mean, I don't know, man. Again, he's more of a piece that they're adding to the room. And I think he might be a solid add. Not a big run blocker guy. And you got to keep on reminding yourself that it's going to be a new, rookie QB going in there. So, I think that's not a bad move on their end. Chiefs agreed to terms with safety Dion Bush. Drew Lock. Oh, I forgot about the Drew Lock signing. I think that happened right when I was out before I came and, started doing this thing. Drew Lock signing with the Giants. I think that's kind of interesting because he had a couple of good games last year when Gino was out. He's signing a 1-year deal with the Giants. There might be some chance that he gets some playing time this year, especially given how not healthy Daniel Jones has been. DJ Dallas has agreed to terms with the Cardinals. Amik Robinson, formerly of the Raiders, agreed to a 2-year deal with the Lions. He's a solid, slot corner. The Raiders drafted several years ago. George Odom, safety, agrees to the terms of the 49ers. I mentioned the Browns re-signed Dunn. Malcolm Roach, Lucky Fotu, Irv Smith. We're waiting to hear about Calvin Ridley. Talked about Derrick Henry and the Ravens. I think that was a good move, was Derrick Henry going to the Ravens. I think that if there was a team that could feature him very well, and he still doesn't have to be a featured back in it, I think it could be them because, again, he's basically supersized Gus Edwards, and they kind of gotten some good moments out of Edwards. Fantasy-wise, I don't think I'm going to be excited about him, but, like actual team decision-wise, I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm not going to just be – I'm on both Kick and on YouTube. I'm going to eventually be doing a lot more things on Kick, but also check out my YouTube. I'm going to be posting more shorter videos on YouTube. And my Kick, I'm going to be doing a lot more of the longer-term kind of stuff. So subscribe, check it out. If you want, you can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of laugh. Punch like a delicious drink in the summer on Kick, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. And I also have been doing comedy in the New York, Rockland, New Jersey area. And check out some of the shows that I've been on in those spots. And tune in next time. I do some video. I should have played Power World when I had the access to that on here, but dude, that thing kept on crashing. It crashed so much. Other than that, have a good week. And not a good week. I'll be back soon. I'm gonna start coming up with some stuff.
We're on to
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
about the past and about the future.